Good afternoon and Salam Malaysia Madani. This is World Today. I'm Mohana Priya. Let's take a quick look at some of the stories we're following.
The United States launched new airstrikes against Iran early Thursday, targeting an airport and key railway bridges. The strikes came despite an MOU signed in mid-June to help bring an end to the war. Following the attacks, Iran accused the U.S. of violating its commitments under the agreement. Kyiv and Washington have reached a political agreement to license the production of Patriot missiles in Ukraine. The agreement follows a meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and U.S. President Donald Trump on the sidelines of the NATO summit in Ankara. Zelensky said technical details still need to be finalized by officials from both countries, adding that Ukraine would begin producing the systems once a final agreement is reached.
I think that they are changing. What we hope that means is that it's going to clear.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has issued a presidential decree setting 28th November as the date for legislative elections, which would be the first in 20 years if held as planned. A date for the presidential election, scheduled for the first quarter of next year, will be set in accordance with the law. A fire broke out at the former Bata shoe factory in Zilin, with flames engulfing the 9th floor of the building. Dozens of people were evacuated from the building. No casualties nor injuries have been reported from the incident.
Thank you for joining us. The United States launched new intensive airstrikes against Iran early Thursday, hitting an airport and key railway bridges, a move that threatens a fragile interim deal intended to help end the war in the West Asia. According to local media, U.S. forces struck Iran Shah Airport early on Thursday, killing one person. In a separate strike, U.S. forces also targeted the Ak-Tekehan railway bridge in Iran's northeastern Golestan province. From Wednesday night to the early hours of Thursday, explosions were also reported across critical coastal regions, including the port cities of Bandar Abbas, Sirik and Chabaha. The U.S. Central Command said in a post on X that its forces started conducting additional strikes against Iran to further degrade their ability to threaten freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. The latest U.S. strikes came despite a Memorandum of Understanding or MOU signed in mid-June aimed at ending the conflict between the two countries. Following the attacks, Iran accused the U.S. of violating its commitments under the agreement. Responding to U.S. President Donald Trump's earlier remarks that the MOU is over, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai said on social media that the MOU was never based on trust, but on a clear mechanism of commitment for commitment. Based on the fifth clause of the memorandum, Iran is responsible for determining arrangements for the safe passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz. But the U.S. has challenged this clause and in practice violated the agreement's structure through its unilateral actions and attacks against Iran. The spokesman said Iran will resolutely defend its national interests and sovereignty. Amid the escalating tensions between Iran and the U.S., the United Nations expressed deep concern over the resurgence of violence in Iran and around the Strait of Hormuz in West Asia.
Tit for tat needs to stop, right? A return to diplomacy is urgently needed for the sake of stability in the region, for the sake of global stability. I mean, we keep talking about the impact that this conflict is having on the global economy, and I think all of the parties involved need to understand that the best way to end this conflict is a return to the negotiating table.
The U.S. military said its forces have helped ensure the safe passage of more than 800 commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz since early May. U.S. forces have also helped to facilitate the safe transit of 380 million barrels of crude oil through the vital international shipping corridor. The update comes as the fragile truce between the U.S. and Iran faces renewed pressure. Despite the volatility, shipping traffic through the waterway has continued. Iran and the U.S. exchanged attacks over the past 2 days amid an escalation following Iranian attacks on 3 commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. will oversee the withdrawal of Israeli troops from several pilot areas in southern Lebanon, with the first process expected to begin within days. According to U.S. and Lebanese officials, the move is part of the implementation of a framework agreement agreed on the 28th of June to reduce tensions in the area. Under the agreement, Israeli forces will withdraw in stages from several areas in southern Lebanon, while the Lebanese army will take full control of 2 designated pilot areas. The Lebanese president, Joseph Aoun, was informed that a U.S. military delegation would arrive in Beirut in the near future to coordinate the implementation mechanism on the ground. Meanwhile, a U.S. official said that the process of implementing the agreement has begun, with the U.S. Central Command, or CENTCOM, coordinating its implementation with both countries. New negotiations between Israel and Lebanon are scheduled to take place in Rome, Italy next week, involving technical teams from both sides and held behind closed doors. Russian strikes killed at least 265 civilians in Ukraine and injured 1,816 in June, the highest combined casualty count since the first months after Moscow's full-scale invasion in February 2022. UN Political Affairs Chief Rosemary DiCarlo said that the number of civilians killed and injured in Ukraine in May had been highest since April 2022, but data from the UN's Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights pointed to an even higher toll in June and possibly July.
In total, since the start of the Russian Federation's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, OHCHR has verified that at least 16,402 civilians, including 802 children, have been killed in Ukraine. 48,428 civilians, including 2,948 children, have been injured. These figures account only for verified casualties. Actual figures are likely significantly higher.
She added that the civilians living in Ukrainian territories under the Russian occupation and inside Russia were also being killed. Russian authorities have reported that 250 civilians were killed and 1,596 were injured inside Russia in the first 6 months of 2026. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Kiev and Washington had reached a political agreement on licensing the production of Patriot missiles in Ukraine, following a meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump at the NATO summit in Ankara. His comments came after Trump said that the U.S. would grant Ukraine a license to manufacture Patriot missile interceptors, a huge boost for Kiev, which has long sought permission to produce the defensive weapons. Zelensky said technical details still needed to be worked out by officials from both countries, adding that Ukraine would begin producing the systems once a final agreement is reached. He added that Ukraine expects a new U.S. shipment in the coming days and has secured additional agreements with European partners for more PAC-3 interceptors. Turning to NATO, Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez played down tensions with the US after President Donald Trump reiterated a threat to halt trade with a NATO ally. Sánchez said he had an informal and cordial exchange with the U.S. president, focused on football and the World Cup in the U.S., stressing that there was no tension in the conversation. He described bilateral relations as positive, highlighting long-standing ties that have endured across different administrations in both countries, and used the moment to congratulate the U.S. on the 250th anniversary of its independence. On trade, Sánchez emphasized that Spain runs a deficit with the U.S. The U.S. sells more to Spain than it buys, exporting $26.6 billion in goods to the country in 2025 and importing $21.35 billion. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that NATO had emerged from its annual summit stronger and more united, citing US President Donald Trump's closing remarks, which he said had praised the spirit and unity of the meeting. The outgoing Prime Minister added that the alliance had achieved its principal goal of reinforcing cohesion.
So what's really important now is, notwithstanding the challenges, that we all focus on getting back to that ceasefire, implementing the understanding, and playing our part in getting the Strait of Hormuz open, which does involve pulling together the coalition that the French and the UK are leading on in relation to reassurance is very important. And so that's where my focus is. I'm not going to pretend the last few days hasn't presented additional challenges. Of course it has. But it's important to keep focused on what is it we want to achieve.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has issued a presidential decree setting 28th of November as the date for the legislative elections. Now, if the vote goes ahead, it will be the first in 20 years. The decree calls on the Palestinian people in East Jerusalem, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip to participate in free and direct legislative elections to elect members of the Palestinian Legislative Council on the 28th of November. Issued in accordance with the provisions of Law No. 1 of 2007 concerning general elections and its amendments, the decree aims to consolidate the foundations of democracy and complete the electoral process that began in the state of Palestine. A date for the presidential elections, scheduled for the first quarter of next year, will be determined in accordance with the law. The last legislative elections in the Palestinian territories were held in 2006, when Hamas secured a shock victory. Australia and India reached a deal to export Australian uranium to India for use in the nuclear energy industry, while agreeing to deepen cooperation in renewables, critical minerals and green hydrogen. India has long eyed Australia's uranium reserves to help meet a target of 100 gigawatts of nuclear energy capacity by 2047, while Australia is looking to diversify trade beyond its reliance on China, its top partner.
Today we can confirm the signing of the administrative arrangement to enable uranium exports to India for peaceful purposes under the 2015 Australia-India Nuclear Cooperation Agreement. The arrangement facilitates Australian uranium exports to India to help increase the share of non-fossil fuel power capacity, providing an additional market for the Australian resources sector.
ऑस्ट्रेलिया से भारत को यूरेनियम सप्लाई का मार्ग खुलेगा और हमारे क्लीन एनर्जी के उद्देश्यों को नई ताकत मिलेगी। क्रिटिकल मिनरल्स में हमारा सहयोग हमारी स्ट्रेटेजिक सिक्योरिटी और क्लीन एनर्जी ट्रांजिशन के लिए महत्वपूर्ण है।
Though both nations agreed to a nuclear cooperation pact in 2014, uranium exports have been limited over concerns about ensuring nuclear fuel is used solely for peaceful purposes, such as energy generation. Coming up, 8 Rohingya children killed in camp landslide. Stay with us.
kecemasan boleh saya bantu?
Hello, there's been a motorcycle accident here. Maybe an elephant ran it over?
Sir, there is fire accident at the address number 5 Jalan Tembika Shah Alam.
PGO from FRT Shah Alam, there was no fire accident here. Over.
MERS 999. Use it wisely.
Heavy monsoon rains triggered a landslide at a school in a Rohingya refugee camp in southeastern Bangladesh, killing at least 8 children and injuring 5 others. The deaths came after separate rain-triggered landslides earlier this week killed 8 Rohingya refugees, including women and children in the camps. Rescuers later recovered 13 children from the school. 8 of them died, while the rest were admitted to hospitals in the camps for treatment. More than 1.2 million Rohingya refugees live in overcrowded camps in Cox's Bazar, the world's largest refugee settlement, after fleeing a 2017 military crackdown in neighbouring Buddhist-majority Myanmar. A fire broke out at a former Bata shoe factory in Zilin, with flames engulfing the 9th floor of the building. Now, the blaze prompted a major emergency response, with firefighters deploying 30 units, around 300 personnel and a helicopter to battle the flames. According to Vaski's statement on Facebook, the building, which was being used as shoe storage by the Vaski company, contained approximately 70,000 pairs of shoes. Dozens of people were evacuated from the building, and residents in the surrounding area were urged not to open windows due to dangerous fumes from the fire. No casualties or injuries have been reported from the incident. The Bata factory complex in Zilin was once a symbol of industrial innovation, created by Thomas Bata nearly a century ago as a utopian factory village. Meanwhile, another factory fire had been reported in China, where at least 28 people were killed after flames swept through a multi-story shoe factory in the southeast of the country. Video shared on social media on Thursday showed people trapped on a rooftop as flames ripped through a shoe factory in the Chinese city of Guangzhou. Fire and rescue teams had dispatched 183 people and 35 vehicles to the site. Xinhua said a total of 239 people were at the factory when the fire broke out. It said 213 were evacuated. 2 of them died after being taken to hospital for treatment. Another 26 people, previously reported missing at the scene, were confirmed dead. A local official told preliminary findings indicate that the fire started on the ground floor of the factory, but the investigation is still ongoing. Pakistani rescuers recovered the wreckage of a Boeing 737 cargo plane in the Arabian Sea 12 hours after it went missing off the coast of Karachi, with search operations continuing for 5 crew members. The Pakistan Airports Authority said that the wreckage of the K2 Airways freighter was located 98 kilometers south of Ormara port, adding that the Pakistan Navy and Maritime Security Agency had deployed air and sea assets in the ongoing search. Air traffic control lost contact 3 minutes later when the aircraft was about 155 nautical miles west of Karachi after radar showed it descending rapidly. Flight tracking data showed that the plane plunged 5,000 feet in less than a minute, surging 6,000 feet in 30 seconds, then dived catastrophically from 36,550 feet. The last transmission placed the aircraft at 1,100 feet with a vertical descent rate of minus 22,400 feet per minute, roughly 400 kilometers per hour. Commuting and sleeping proved difficult for Londoners as the city sweltered in the 3rd heat wave of the year. Now, temperatures in the British capital were forecast to reach at least 30 degrees Celsius just days after a June heat wave saw extreme temperatures in the UK break the record for the hottest June day.
It's intense. It's difficult. I think the commute to work is probably the most intense bit. Like our infrastructure system is definitely built for, 12 degrees, up to 15 degrees maybe, and now you're on the Bakerloo line and it's like 38 degrees. Everyone's looking quite worse for wear. Everyone's got electric fans around their necks now, water spray.
It's not easy, so waking up more than often, using the fan, etc. And then in the daytime, I'm just walking now rather than use the tube because I've got a bit of time on my hands. So I'll walk down and get a different tube from further.
And that's it from us this afternoon. Catch the 2026 FIFA World Cup via RTM's channels on MyTV and RTM Click. #Satu Bola Satu Dunia. Celebrate each goal, each moment, each emotion with RTM. Thanks for watching.